thank you all for coming, and I want to give my particular thanks to Eric Fischl for being here for the first Artist Speak of the season, 2016. And I suspect that Eric Fischl needs no introduction, but particularly out here on the East End where he's well known and much loved. But so I'll just briefly say this, that he is an acclaimed painter and a sculptor, as you all know. And he, over a long and fruitful career, he has been one of the most influential figurative painters of the 20th and the 21st centuries. He came to widespread public attention at his first solo show back in 1979 in New York City. And his paintings, his narrative paintings at that time, were lauded for capturing the dark undercurrents of American suburban life. In the decades since, his work has been the subject of numerous solo and group shows all over the world and part of corporate and museum collections internationally. In the US alone, his work can be found at the Met, the Whitney, the Museum of Modern Art, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles, among many, many others, including our own parish museum out here in Southampton. He is the founder of something called America Here and Now, which is a multidisciplinary traveling exhibition which was launched in 2011 and has sparked the American conversation on art. And is the author of a riveting memoir called Bad Boy, which I binge read over 36 hours a couple of weeks ago. More than a month ago. So I highly recommend it. So please welcome Eric Fischl.
I did just a couple of corrections.
Okay.
In that, one is if you want to find my work at the museums that you're going to have to go to the vaults.
That's very modest.
And the other is that the America Now and Here was it no longer exists. It was a project that I tried to put together in 2007, I guess it was, and spent several years trying to make it work. It was an incredible thing, the participation of the artists, poets, playwrights, musicians, filmmakers, all the arts came together to try to do something about America that could go out into the country and try to start a civilized conversation about who we are and what we share and stuff like that. And unfortunately, its timing coincided with the collapse of our economy, and it became more and more difficult to make it happen. So that stands as one of my big regrets. So.
Well,
but thanks for bringing up a sore spot.
Right. Good start, anyway. So let me just say that people that don't know you and who haven't read Bad Boy, which is, of course, nobody in this room, would be surprised to hear that you stumbled into art, or you didn't rush headlong into an art career. It was more when you were older, at 19 or 20 years old, was it? Can you describe the circumstances where you first were exposed to the idea of being an artist?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a suburban household that didn't, the only art we saw was, on class trips or something to go to the Met and look at mummies. And,
I remember
the other kind of stuff was magazines, television, and movies, and that was basically my visual education. My parents had a certain sort of fantasy about creativity, and I know my mother was somebody who she would take art classes, and she couldn't sustain anything. She'd try writing a novel, she'd try taking art classes, whatever. So my sense of art was, if she couldn't do it, I certainly couldn't do it. And it couldn't be done, and we were just regular people, and blah, blah, blah. So, I flunked out of college my first year. My father had talked me into taking business courses. which I tried, and it not only was it not my sensibility, but it also coincided. It was 1966, 67. It coincided with the sort of swing of the hippie movement, the love generation, and drugs, and so I got involved in that. Flunked out of college and dropped out to San Francisco. And did that for a while. I have to say I was not a very good hippie. I tried, but no matter how stoned I got, I found I was very judgmental of other people. So I wasn't cool. That sort of do your own thing would drive me up the wall. Anyway, but I got into some. So I moved myself into a place where I was overdrugged and depressed, and so I went home. But by that time, my parents had moved to Phoenix. I grew up on Long Island here. My parents had moved to Phoenix, so when I went home, it was to a place I'd never been before, and so I didn't know anybody, and I got a job delivering lawn furniture, and there was a guy there who took art classes at a community college, and we'd get stoned together and talk, and he would be working on his art projects, and I would argue with him that it wasn't art. It's like, his thing, or the one that I remember the most, was he glued bread to window panes. And I was coming out of, I don't know what art is, but Rembrandt is the artist. That ain't art, what you're doing. But anyway, we had these arguments, and eventually, over time, I found myself, he'd be doing something, and I go, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And he'd be like, why don't you go do it? And I would go, no, I'm not an artist. I can't do that. And he'd go, just do it. Shut up, blah, blah, blah. And so I figured, maybe I should take art classes at this junior college as well, and just to meet other people. And if you fail at art, you actually don't fail. They give you a C, right? So it's like, what's to lose?
Yeah.
Anyway, telling the story of how I came to it isn't actually what's important about it. What is important about it was that I found immediately two things that made me realize no matter how good I was or not, I was going to do this the rest of my life. And what those two things was, it was the first time in my life, and I'm 20 years old as I'm starting to take these courses. It was the first time in my life that I could stand being alone. And it was also the first time in my life that I could concentrate. And so I thought, I'd never experienced feeling integrated. And that's what art made me feel. So I thought, even if I suck, I'm just going to be making sucky things, but at least I'll be me.
Okay. Yeah, right.
I'll be an integrated suck.
Right. Whoa.
Yeah.
So you ended up at Cal Arts on scholarship.
Yeah, that was a fluke too, right?
But what I thought was, this was sort of almost difficult to read about because you're at Cal Arts and it's a mirror of the contemporary art world in some sense, in that it was, as you describe it, a hotbed of minimalism and figurative painting. Painting was dead, but particularly figurative painting. And here you were, you wanted to be a contemporary artist of consequence, and but it was in direct conflict with what your voice would end up being as a figurative painter. So, in a sense, you could say that your ambition kind of suppressed your natural instinct to be a figurative painter.
I painted the whole time I was there.
No, I know you painted the whole time, but you didn't allow yourself to paint figuratively for many years.
Yeah, it wasn't really available, it's true.
But do you look back on that time, which was a struggle to get where you would become a figurative painter? Do you look at it as a time that made you a better artist as a whole, or as something that just impeded your progress?
I think it was a blessing.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was a blessing in that and it was a totally negative experience, right?
Yeah.
But it was something where you had to learn how to defend this thing that you loved, right? Mm. That you loved on levels you couldn't even articulate, that you were connected to. I really believe a painter doesn't choose to be a painter. What you choose to be is a better painter, right? But the actual making of a painting is something that is so deeply ingrained in your way of organizing information that if you don't do it, you sort of slip into the chaos of daily life and stuff like that. So it wasn't about that. It was what I'm defending is I'm defending this thing that is me, right? It's not an arbitrary decision, an intellectual choice. I'm defending myself, the right to be me, right? And the thing that was interesting was that at CalArts, the attack and the defense were all happening among painters. That you kind of really didn't argue with those who did conceptual art and performance and photography and things like that. You weren't like constantly, saying, that's not art, this is, blah, blah, blah. It was sort of like, that's their thing, I don't know how to do that, whatever. But there was this thing where because painting was so dead, according to the critical world, we found as students that we would inflict just horrible pain on each other as a way of proving that it wasn't dead, right? It's like kind of like schizophrenics who burn themselves. It's like you're dissociated from something, and the only way you can feel real is to get pain going as a thing. It kind of had that almost drama to it. We would have these critiques where we just shred each other. I mean, it was
hard to read about.
Fabulous.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
But what do you come away with? You come away with a deep, deep conviction in the rightness of what you're doing. But constant frustration because it's not achieving the thing that you're hoping it would achieve.
Well, yeah, and still you hadn't gotten to the place where you wanted to be.
Yeah, that was 7-8 years away.
Yeah. Which is a long time. Mm-hmm. Your first commercially successful paintings like Bad Boy, Sleepwalker, A Woman Possessed, drew on your tumultuous, somewhat tragic, really, adolescence and life in suburbia. And maybe you can talk about that a little bit, but you say those paintings reveal the rift between what was experienced and what could not be said. Mm-hmm. And when I read that, I thought, looking at all of your work, or much of your work, your paintings anyway, that's a through line that still exists, that it's not just to that time. Can you talk about that? Is it a through line still in your mind?
Yeah, I think that there's that we live and have experiences that are, contrary to what we hope, wish, believe, are appropriate, inappropriate. We have feelings that conflict in ways that, for me, I'm always trying to find the adjustment. I saw this, I don't know how I feel about it. How do I feel about it? Can I express how I feel about it and show those feelings, so. But
you also show it in other people, you're the subjects themselves.
I show it through other people.
Yeah, through other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I see people. I think I select the people in my work as characters that represent to me something that express feelings or situations, feelings of awkwardness or aggression or some kind of timidity or something like that. It's like a body language that comes through people that we all perceive body language without attaching words to it. Very quickly you can read a moment, So it's trying to sort of find those things and then put them into another context that expresses things that I'm feeling and thinking about. So it's not uncommon for people who have been in my paintings and know me to tell me that that's not me.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I don't know
No,
who you think that person is. It might look like me, but that is not me.
Yeah, it would be scary to be painted by you, I think. So those early paintings, you rode a wave of fame in the 80s with other of your contemporaries like David Salle and Cindy Sherman and Julian Schnabel. And you've written about that, and you've written about your ambivalence with fame. Your feelings about fame are ambivalent, even though it gave you much. Do you think that fame or extreme fame or early fame is necessarily destructive to a creative personality?
I don't think it's destructive. I think that a personality is going to self-destruct no matter what, right? If they're inclined that way. So if they achieve something later or earlier, if they're inclined that way, they'll mistreat it. I've known people who've achieved success later in their lives and they still don't know how to handle it. Sort of cut ties with everybody that helped them get there, and
Really?
et cetera. Sure.
Huh.
So, but fame it's an amazing and complicated experience. You start to sense fame the first time somebody you don't know knows you, right? That's when it begins, and it's a small thing. It's like somebody who saw your show that recognized you on the street and you don't know who they are, but they're saying something about you, right? Mm-hmm. And then it sort of goes out from there, and trying to maintain an inner self when you start to feel that you have this outer self that is so much bigger than you are. It's in so many places at the same time. It's in countries that you don't even speak the language, et cetera, that it's complicated to try to figure out how to maintain your, the reason that you're there, the things that you really care about.
Yeah.
And then you find in weak moments that you walk into a room and go, do they know who I am?
Right.
I mean, do they have any idea who is going to sit down at this table and order a hamburger? I mean,
yeah.
And then you say to yourself, Eric, do you know who you are?
Yeah. Still, it must be fun sometimes, I have to say.
There are moments.
Yeah. So your paintings fall into distinct narratives, like the bullfight paintings, the Rome paintings, the Saint-Tropez, or the Krefeld project, if I'm saying that right, or currently the art fairs. What signals the end for you? How do you know you've come to the end of a narrative?
Well, first of all the paintings that become series for me don't start out as series. I'm not a serial painter in the sense that I think I'm going to do a suite of scenes on a beach or a bullfight or blah blah blah. What it is I have an experience that I want to capture, and I make a painting of it that doesn't capture it. And it leads me to another painting that, because the thing that I've experienced is big enough that it keeps me going, keeps on going, keeps getting richer, deeper in some way. So I follow it. And so then at a certain point, there's usually one or two paintings that seem to fully embody the thing that I was looking for, but they come, I don't know when they come, so it could be 3 paintings, it could be 10 paintings, it could be 20 paintings, I mean, the bullfight painting series, for example, culminated in the 8th painting.
Okay.
And it was something that, when it was done, I realized I had nothing else to say about the bullfight. Of course, I'd only been to one bullfight. If I went back to another bullfight, maybe I would have more to say. But within that context, it was one. I mean, it was the 8th painting that was the one. So.
You've said also that that an artist has to fool themselves into thinking what they're doing is good enough. Mm-hmm. That it never lives up to the vision, but it opens the door for the next painting, which is what you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Have you ever unabashedly been in love with something you've done? You've never. Is there anything that you've done and you just feel that it doesn't fall short?
I have. Nothing's jumping to mind, so that probably is an indication that no is the answer. But I was going to say that I start every painting with that feeling, that unabashed love. Oh. This is going to be amazing. I'm so thrilled with myself. I can't wait to see it and show everybody this earth-shattering thing. And then that doesn't last long.
Okay. Well, which brings up this question: what is it like? How do you approach the studio? Is your studio, when you're in it, is it joy? Is it frustration? What are the feelings that you have as you actually paint or sculpt?
Yeah, that is the definition of a studio. Actually, what you just said. It's joy. It's frustration. It's work. It's aggravation, it's dreaming, it's downtime, right. It's wandering, it's all these. It is a creative space,
right.
And it's fantastic in that way. And it always amazes me how quickly cold a studio will get if you like. Often happens if you a bunch of work and then it goes out, and then you walk in and the walls are empty and you have to kind of get the engines going again. How dead that space is, and how long it takes to get it hot again. And all of the artists in the room will know that when a studio is hot, it's like you walk into the studio, you're already in it. I mean, it's talking to you, it's feeding you in the way that's going to produce the work and stuff. So,
do you have any rituals that you engage in? I mean, to get ready to work?
Yeah. I usually kill somebody.
Yeah, right. I was going to
feed them to the art god.
I was going to say, except for the sacrificial. Yeah, right.
Well, it's got to start someplace.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, no, it depends. There's the cleaning of the studio, the scraping of the palette, the cleaning of the brushes, that kind of thing. There's
do you have to have
things like where I'll start with, I'll do drawings or something for a while before I sort of re-engage the painting or a sculpture or something. So oftentimes sculpture is a way of, starting something, letting the painting sort of go away and get clean and then come back, so I'll sculpt in the meantime until it does. So.
Your friend Steve Martin says that you find the inner hound dog in your portraiture. You find the inner hound dog, or maybe in many of your paintings, you find the inner hound dog in your subjects. How do you find the inner hound dog? I mean, for instance, actually, I think on this handout that we gave you, there's a painting of Lauren Michaels.
Oh,
and
I
you
thought you were
talked
going to say
about
there's
that.
a painting of a hound dog.
No. And there's
I
a
was right
painting
there.
of Lauren Michaels. And you have talked about specifically about, what he seemed to be initially and what he was to you. So if you talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. I actually Lauren. It was a commission that he did. I've done a lot of paintings of my friend Steve, and Lauren saw one and wanted one. And so he approached me. I'd never met him before. And the way I do portraits which is the way I do paintings as well, is I take photographs and then work from them. So Lauren came to the studio, and we chatted it up. He's a really gregarious guy, and so the conversation was easy. But we're chatting away, and he's telling all kinds of great stories, and I'm taking lots of photographs. And he leaves. He was there maybe an hour and a half, something like that. And then he leaves and stuff. And I download the photos, and I don't download the photo. This was back during film, so I had them developed. And then they come back, and I'm looking through them, and I'm seeing something that wasn't what I was feeling when he was there. Like I couldn't believe one photograph after the other was showing a person that wasn't as confident, wasn't as vital, wasn't as felt like every photo I was looking at somebody questioning themselves or something like that. It was weird, and because when I was in the moment with him, talking, laughing, there was that, but there was something in the photos that didn't convey that aspect of it. So now I'm like working on this painting. I choose one that I like of him sitting in a chair. I guess there's an image in there. And I'm painting it, and I'm having to deal with the fact that basically what I'm painting is a guy that seems world weary. And I like the painting. I like the. I was perfectly happy that if he came in and said, "I don't want it," I would be happy to have the painting, because it really does capture a thing, a truth about all our lives.
And does he own it, in fact?
He does.
And
yeah.
did he like it?
No.
Oh.
That was what was interesting about it. He comes in and he's like stunned.
Yeah, right.
And he's like speechless. And he's looking at it, and then he's like, kind of going, that wasn't what I was expecting. I'm not. I don't know how to feel about this. But I don't know whether I want this, and going on like that. And I'm like, telling him it's totally cool. If you don't, it's fine. I'm happy with it, whatever. But what I noticed was he couldn't take his eyes off it. And then we're sitting down and we're talking and stuff, and he keeps looking at the painting, whatever we're talking about. He keeps looking at the painting and this, and I was saying, I was telling him my experience of how the photos were showing me something that I hadn't noticed, and I had to be truthful to that aspect of it. And he got around to this thing of like, yeah, he'd been in this place in his life. He's now, was, I don't know whether he was 60 years old or something like that, mm-hmm. and he'd kind of done everything that and now he was exhausted on certain levels, and anyway, he started talking about this thing, and then the next thing, he said he would take it. It was great. Okay, and then I ran into someone later, and they said, "Oh yeah, I saw you did a painting of Lauren. It's in his house, like in this little nook around the corner, you know, etc.
Yeah.
And I went, wow, he's hanging it. That's interesting. And then a few years later, I heard, you know, God, I love that portrait of Lorne, somebody said. And he said, oh, really? You saw it around the Nook? And he went, no, it's in his living room. It's like, you know, something like that. So it obviously grew on him.
Yeah, right. So you paint some of your subjects with clothes and some of them naked.
I see them all naked in my head.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
So what kind of freedom or vocabulary or whatever word you want to use does painting them naked give you? Because sometimes they're together in the same painting. There'll be somebody naked and somebody clothed. Yeah. And so why is one clothed and one naked?
I've only painted one person, you know, that I love. One of my, you know, dearest, close people, I've only painted naked, one. Others of my dear loved ones that I've painted, they're in clothes. April is my wife is the only one I've painted naked that I know. Everybody else that's naked in my paintings, I don't know. You know, they're models or actors or, you know, they're people that I've sort of voyeuristically got.
I get that part, but even still, some of the people that you paint with clothes are people that you don't know. Mm-hmm. So what is the what does it give you? What is painting somebody naked, or what does the naked figure allow you to do?
That was something that was evolved. Mm-hmm. I was very earnest early on in my painting scenes to strip people bare, to bring them down. I always made a distinction. These are not nudes. These are naked people. Mm-hmm. And naked was really about, let's go down to an essential place. Let's go down to you know, strip the defenses or the attitudes or the pose away, and just get real here in the moment. And so it was about naked, finding and creating situations that revealed something that was under the surface of our expectations and our preconceptions and whatnot. And then over the years, as I matured, it became less important to continually go to that place. That really what was starting to take over, I guess, was that there was a richness to you know, kind of daily life where people inhabit their bodies, including their clothes, in ways that is as revealing. You know, maybe not as revealing to them, but as revealing to those of us peering into that thing. So it was about trying to find what those, you know, where that space was.
Speaking of the one person that you've painted naked, April, how do you all, April is also a successful painter. Mm-hmm. How do you all interact professionally? I mean, in the land of Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner, you wonder how two successful painters, what effect do they have on each other's work? How do they influence each other's work?
Yeah. Well, it's a real blessing to live with another painter, specifically, you know, a painter-to-painter thing, because. But I think probably to live with another artist is also a blessing. But you know, speaking for me, the painter thing has been incredible, because there are certain things that you don't need to talk about. There are certain things that you love talking about. There are certain things that you need help with, that the person is able to do. April's a lot more confident in her whole being, but certainly in her work, that she doesn't ask me each painting to come in and, you know, sort of see if it's done, or if I had other, you know, if there's comments that I would make or something. I invite her in every painting to sort of say, because, you know, I tend to feel a painting's done long before it's actually done.
And she will see that.
I'm hoping it's finished.
Yeah. And
I
she'll
wish
see
it
that.
were done.
Yeah.
So I bring her in. I've found, artists have they have a list, and it's in their head, the list of everything that's wrong with their work, right? And the trouble with being an artist with your own work is that you don't know whether you're just projecting your own paranoia, your own neuroses, or whether there actually is something wrong with it. And so what I find helpful is she comes in and looks at the painting. If she starts talking about things that aren't on my list, I tend to say, well, she's projecting her thing onto my thing, right? And sometimes there's an interesting thing I could use, but mostly it doesn't have to do with the work. If she comes in and starts hitting the things that I've already said are wrong with the work, I'm screwed. And I have to kind of face, dealing with those things. But what I found in terms of process is that just that break from me thinking it's over, it's finished, to her coming in and saying, no, you should really, that edge isn't working, or you should get rid of this, or why is this, blah, 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 gives me the renewed energy to actually go in and finish the piece. So I find it incredibly helpful in a way. And so that's it. Now, in terms of living with another artist, where the problem comes in, which is a pressure, is when careers get out of scale. And it's an external pressure. We're all artists, all are making things because they love and they want love in return. And so you look for love, and if you're with somebody that's getting more love than you, it becomes complicated. And I know with April, she's had to suffer a lot of humiliation in things that are, where we get photographed at a gala event or something, and then she gets cut out of the picture when it's produced, that kind of shit. So, you try to suffer along with them and deal with that. But it also takes a very strong partner to sustain that.
So two of your most beautiful sculptures, Tumbling Woman, which was your 9/11 tribute, and Soul in Flight, which honored the late tennis player Arthur Ashe. Both of them were very controversial, particularly Tumbling Woman. You could say they were misunderstood. Is being misunderstood, does that just go with the territory of being an artist, or is it a completely fresh and shocking wound each time?
I am an artist precisely because I've been misunderstood as a child, right? That formed some major part of my character. I hate being misunderstood. I find it excruciatingly painful. So my ambition is not to be misunderstood. My ambition is to be so clear about my work, my intentions, my caring, my love, my devotion, all of the things that no one is going to say, well, you did that because you're just trying to, build your moribund career on the back of suffering people. I mean, which is what Andrea Pizer said about my Tumbling Woman sculpture. So, yes, no, I find it incredibly painful to be misunderstood.
And also to have to defend endlessly in words what you were trying to say.
Work doesn't, you run defense or something like that.
Right.
No, but, well, in terms of the Arthur Ashe memorial or sculpture, that wasn't a big controversy, frankly. It was something that, and you could see it would have to come because I did a sculpture of a naked athlete, which is unheard of in this country. I mean, you have to go back to the Romans and the Greeks to get naked athletes, kind of thing. And so I think, and not only that, but it wasn't a portrait of Arthur Ashe. It was a sort of, I was trying to embody something that I felt was an essential aspect of him and of the sport of tennis itself.
It was timeless.
And it had to be timeless.
Yeah.
And I had presented it to the committee, who ultimately backed me, obviously because the thing got done. Precisely talking about that, you want something, what he embodies as a not just an athlete, but as a social activist, a humanist, somebody who really changed so much for not only the sport, but for the civil rights movement and stuff like that. Why do you want to see him in short tennis pants from 1965
with a Nike swish,
and a wooden racket, and it's like, why make it time specific when what he represents is timeless, or should be considered timeless. So again, let's take it down to something that strips away that aspect of it. They understood that, and then of course people got like, wow, a naked tennis player, how can you, didn't even look like him, and then but it was short-lived.
Okay. The art fair paintings that you're currently doing, and they are up at the Starstead Gallery. They're coming down this weekend?
They come down Saturday. I think it's the last day.
And they are, if you all haven't seen them, actually there's one on the handout there. They are paintings of people at art fairs, and they are, the people depicted in the paintings have absolutely no interest with what's on the wall. They're not looking at the paintings, they're only looking at each other, they're interested in their self-image, they're interested in what's on their cell phone. Ironically, according to the director of the gallery, they're being snapped up by the very collectors who look like they're not interested in art. I mean, what do you make of that irony?
How hard do you have to bite the hand?
I know, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, right.
It's, I actually don't think that they're just about art fairs. I think like all of my work, there's a context in which to see people behave and to see them struggle with their desire, their needs, the disconnects, the missed opportunities, things like that. And so the art fairs are, they're kind of, I hate them as a reality in the art world, because they're doing so much damage. But in terms of a context, it's really interesting and complicated. You have, what you have is you have artists who are in their studio trying desperately to communicate, right? And they're doing things that are meant to attract your attention, and they're meant to engage you in some kind of meaningful exchange. And then that work goes out to an art fair, which has a time restriction to it, which is to say it's like speed dating, right? It's so fast-paced. It's meant to be like instant recognition of something, snapping it up or rejecting it, and moving on, right? But visually, what you get is you get the earnestness of the artist hanging on the walls, and each artist has their own distance out from the wall that they project themselves, and so you have, in an art fair, you have artists projecting and being earnest different distances out, trying, some trying more harder and more desperate to reach you than others sitting there quietly, whatever. But you have this kind of tension going on. And but all with the same thing, which is they're wanting you to look at them and to think about them and to care and to connect. And then you have the thing that it's a social atmosphere as well. So people are there for all the other kinds of reasons. There's people are there who are powerful collectors who are snapping up work right and left, demonstrating that they can do all of that. And you have people who are wanting to be seen, and so they're dressed to the nines and they're doing their thing. And you know, they're not seeing the art, they're seeing each other, and you know, you have that, and then you have, you know, young artists going around trying to get a foot in the door, and they're handing out their flyers and, you know, trying to be seen and connect, and you know, you have all these layers of intention and behavior going on. It's like a circus.
Yeah.
But I mean it in a literal way. It's like characters that, you know, everybody does something that kind of blows your mind, and it's like they're all metaphors for life in this kind of weird environment, you know. So there's something like that that's there. So they're amusing. They're fun to paint, and it's fun to.
They're dead on.
Choose the artist who I want to put in. But if you squint your eyes and looking at my art fair painting, if you squint your eyes, what you're really going to see is boys trying to figure out girls, and girls maybe or maybe not trying to figure out boys, you know. But it all to me comes down to that. It's all about, you know, how do you connect to this other?
Right.
And
so, you know, there's what the critics say about your work, and there's what the market pays for your work. So, in all of that kind of noise, how do you value your work?
There is no way to value art in a consistent way. In the same way that there's no way of feeling good about yourself when dealing with homeless people. Like, has there ever been a formula that you can use for dealing with homeless people where you know, don't give them money but you give to a shelter, or you give everybody you see $1, or you just give somebody $20 and say that's it for the day, or you know, there's like no way of knowing how to understand this thing, right? Well, the art exchange is the same exchange, but in that it's like a, you know, as I said, it's an act of love, looking for love. So it's about being requited. What's the value of love? You know, how do you do it? I make a work out of love. It goes to a gallery. I get money back, right? The money that comes back is neutral currency, which means in order for me to feel like I've made an equal exchange, I have to find something I love, something I can do with the money that I love. So I can say, oh, you see, I bought this car with this, and isn't that great?
Yeah.
I wanted this car, and now I got a car, and so that's love, you know. You know, and then of course at a certain point there's surplus, and there's you know, if you're lucky. This is all in the context of if you're lucky, but there's surplus, or you've got all your toys. You know, now what do you do with the neutral currency, right? So it's like, how do you keep turning it back into love? It's not an easy exchange.
Yeah, but it's a high-class problem.
It's one that you can't talk about. Yeah.
right. Even though you have been.
Yeah.
So we're here on the Art Barge, which was
Speaking of money, are we speaking of money?
Which was started by Victor D'Amico, who was the first education director of the Museum of Modern Art. And he felt that the making of art should be, was necessarily an act of self-discovery, was connection. And that, when I read your book, it really reminded me of how you talk about your own art. And yet, today, both in the teaching of art and in the making of art, so much of art is product-oriented. Is that a direction that you deplore or applaud?
deplore. Deplore in that it's. I mean, I agree with D'Amico. I was certainly brought up with that idea that the art for the artist is primarily a journey that you take to self-discovery, and then of course what you hope is that the people that like the work are taking that same journey with you, that you're bringing them in, and that's the exchange that's the most satisfying. The simply production aspect of art to me is the least interesting, and maybe it's because I'm not skillful enough to actually, mass produce in a way that would compete on that level. With there are people out there that are amazing at how they can, spread the work out into the global economy. I don't have that ability. I don't let anybody paint on my paintings so it means one at a time. I don't even make several paintings at once. It's one at a time. It's just that way. So I'm not going to be able to compete on that in that place. But this may blow your mind. A historical thing that I feel is comparable to what's going on now. In the 1640s in Holland, the Dutch get out of their war with France, which has been depleting their economy like crazy, and they get out of that. At the same time, they've developed a sawmill, and that sawmill enables them to build ships, right, on a mass scale. And it also leads them to build a canal system, not only through the country, but through Europe, so that their boats that they're building can reach deep into the interior of Europe, as well as start sailing around the world, right? So you have this huge economy boom that's happening in the 1640s, begins or something like that. And you have a rising burgher class, a merchant class that is profiting off of this. Now, also think of the composition of Holland at the time because of this was they needed so much manpower that they were getting immigrants from North Africa and Middle East and coming in to do it. There was a huge Jewish migration into Holland, getting out of the what was going on in Spain with the Moors and stuff like that, and fleeing that and getting set up in businesses in Holland. So there was an economy there that was, multi-complected and healthy and whatnot, and everybody's working and they're producing all this stuff, and they're producing a lot of people that are getting incredibly rich. And those people want to buy art, and they want to buy a lot of art, and so the art guild comes into being, and the art studio where they're beginning to have Vermeer and Rembrandt especially was hiring people to help paint his paintings, et cetera, et cetera. These things were starting to really flower. And the thing is that the people who were commissioning the work wanted only certain things, which had a huge impact on the art. They wanted landscape painting, which was a minor genre, but they wanted landscape paintings that only represented where they lived. They wanted no mythology paintings, no religious paintings. They wanted portraits of themselves. They wanted scenes of what they did, workers, what they did. If they were jewelers or built ships, or they wanted those kind of genres, right? And they wanted decorative arts. They wanted the sort of, this flowerful still lives that look so beautiful, flower still lives on their walls and stuff, right? And they were putting them in every house they were building and stuff like that. So here's the kicker. Between like 1640 and 1675, I think it is, 10 million works of art were made.
God.
10 million works of art were made in a country that only had 2 million people in it to begin with, right? And now, less than 1% exist. So, when you think about bubbles, and the thing is that the work that they made had a huge impact on the art coming down past it. Certainly, people like Rembrandt and Vermeer and stuff who were, the greatest of the greats and whatever. But Rubens, and although he'd gone to Italy and was doing religious paintings and stuff like that, but there was all these artists that Bruegel's, et cetera, that have impacted the genres that they were masters of. Nonetheless, so much of that work had just disappeared. It was just simply a part of the avaricious time that was. And it feels that way now. It feels that you can't blame the artists for wanting to fill the market with, if there's that many people want that many, let's find a way of satisfying that thing. And I came to art, being taught by second generation ABEX artists, believing very much in the sort of the discipline and the morality and whatnot and the integrity of their process, their attack on art. They were all making art at a time when there was no market. So for them to find an interior reason to do it was absolutely essential, right? They had to believe that there was a personal reason for making this stuff that nobody was going to buy, right? And so I was I was part of that, belief that seemed like a high form of something. And it was, but we're also a part of the generation of the 80s where this major tectonic shift took place that we had kind of opened the door for, and had no idea what was going to flood through it, and that was that we were becoming the generation that was actually living at a young age off their work. So on one hand, believing that we were doing it for other reasons, but finding that we actually could live off this thing, And then, a market system started to come in and started to change things in a way that, just went crazy. So,
I'm going to ask one more question. You told Steve Martin, I think on the beach, that in the final analysis, you want to be remembered for your sculpture. Is that true, and why?
I think sculpture is so much harder than painting. And I find the problems of sculpture so compelling. And it's different, as a process of it's totally different. The simple way of describing the difference in terms of painting is about your eye seeing and your hand recording what your eye sees. Sculpture is actually about your hand feeling and then your eye looking to see what your hand felt. Right? It sort of reverses the painting thing. And it does it in this way where you discover that your hands actually have memories your brain can't access, except by touch. that it visually you can't call the thing back that the memories have in the hand. So it puts me in a different place when I'm making the thing, and I think to that and the fact that it's essentially a non-narrative thing means that the reason for it being has to be totally inside the thing itself. The gesture of the figure, you know, the surface, the you know, all of that, the material, everything has to be contained in the thing itself, as opposed to a narrative where that starts as something that generates out from it, right? Sculpture is something that pulls everything into its essence, into its, you know, the weight and gravity of essential being, I think, is in there. So I think it's like it's just hard, you know? It just is so complicated. And just as an anecdote, yet another anecdote.
It's your floor.
Yes, thank you. When I started making the paintings that I became known for, people, critics and whatnot would mention Manet and Degas as predecessors to what I was doing, right? But it was like they felt I was bringing something to that conversation in a way, that I was somehow, I don't know what, but they sort of, it was like they would say Manet and Degas not as a way of dismissing me, but as setting up the historical legacy. When I started making sculpture, it was Rodin, end of discussion, period. Right? Now, the same thing for me with painting, figuratively, was because the absence of narrative, the absence of the figure from art had been for a long time. I had to actually go back to the 19th century to find a way to bring the thing that I was trying to do forward into my language, into today. But I had to connect to those that had worked in the 19th century when not only painting was, you know, vital, but you know, figuration, narrative, daily life, you know, all these things were considered, you know, wonderful things, and people were trained to do that, right? Well, the same thing is true with sculpture. In order to make sculpture, not to do mannequins or play with dolls, but to actually make a sculpture of a figure, I had to go back to the 19th century to find that place. And I had to go back to the 19th century skipping over Giacometti to do it, okay? Now, what's interesting to me about that is that Rodin was considered the last and greatest sculptor of flesh and bone. And this is a guy who believed so much in the body's ability to express itself, to express its pleasure and its torment, that he could cut the body up into the smallest pieces, a hand, a leg, a foot, a head, a shoulder, and you knew exactly what that person was feeling, what that body person was feeling, that every part of the body had the ability to express itself, right? So I had to skip over Giacometti because Giacometti is the opposite of that. Giacometti is a sculptor who is essentially an anorectic view of the body, which is that the body is incapable of expressing itself outwardly, that it can only gnaw away at itself through, you know, because of its anxiety, right? Whittle it down. So the Giacomettis can't bend, twist, turn, reach, hold, grab, touch, twist, you know, they just are there, right? Which is not something I was interested in. So I had to leap over that and go back to Rodin and see if I could pull that forward. And everybody is off balance. Everybody is in a state of motion, whether it's just slightly nodding a head or an eye, or whether it's actually beginning to turn or something. Everybody's in motion. In order to create a narrative, a believable narrative, you need motion. So, and that's what triggers it for me. I look at some of the, through photographs that I've taken, I see somebody doing something. I don't know what I feel about it, but I'm transfixed by this little motion, this little thing that seems like it's a doorway to an interior space. And it's a person who's comfortable or not comfortable with their bodies, right? And then it's like I try to contextualize it for myself. Would I feel that way if I took them outdoors, if I put them indoors, what room should I put them in to see how that works? Are they beginning to turn towards something, or are they beginning to turn away from something? What would that thing be that they're turning towards? Is it something, another person, or is it a dog that just walked into the, what is it that's causing that? And that's how my mind is going as I'm constructing the images. With sculpture, it's like I find a gesture that I think is powerful as a gesture. I can only see the one side of it, whatever it is, but it feels like it's a sculpture, and so I get an armature and I make a model. I sculpt in wax, and I make something, and the minute I move away from what the photo shows me into what it can't show me, I'm on my own, and then it's like how does the hardest parts of the body are the goddamn arms attaching to the rest of the torso. I mean, it's ridiculous, the complexity of that, and trying to figure that out, and it's just stuff like that, and I'll go look through bodies, photographs of dancers, or go to online trying to find something that's kind of the gesture, or close enough that I can say, oh, that's the way this connects to that. But basically, what I'm doing is I'm dimensionalizing this thing for a reason. So anyway.
When you were talking about finishing a painting and it's almost perfect or it's done, and then you sell it, do you feel like a loss, like that's gone and you're never going to see it again, or are you attached to it anymore, or it's over?
I don't have that. It's not that hard to let things go. I think that I make things to go out in the world. I want them to go out. Early on, when I was painting paintings where what I was feeling and revealing of my feelings was so much more difficult, I couldn't wait to get rid of it. I was painting to get it as far away from me as I could. So, I was really wanting it to be out there. And I had this stupid idea that the work that I did was would be something that no one would want to live with. So it would only be like something that you'd maybe want to go see once in a while. So it would be like in a public collection, right? And then it turned out that it was like people wanted to live with it on their own, and public collections didn't want it at all. Or if they got it, they didn't want to show it, or they wanted to put a sign up in front of it, or so, It's so weird. Yeah. But no, I don't have that sentimental sort of, oh, I miss this child, and yeah.
You said that you use the computer to do research for gestures. Do you use it in any other way?
I use it now when I've had for many years. I use Photoshop. what I do is I take lots of photographs when I travel or when I have a model or something. I take lots of photographs. I put them into the computer. I go through. Something strikes me. I cut it out. I try to figure out, all right, where is this? Is this going to be by this, or in that or whatever? I put it in. And then I start the process, the questioning process. I cut another figure out, another chair, this or that, and sort of start telling myself stories. And you go with the computer, it's great because you go through so many ideas so quickly. Turning, oh no, they're looking the other way. Okay, flip, and now they're looking the other way. Oh, they're closer to me, blow it up, It's no, they're farther away, shrink it down. All of those things are really great tools for sort of figuring out the work. Then at some point I hit on something that I said, this will be fun to paint. This is what I want to paint. And then I go to the canvas. Now, the Photoshop thing is there. It's a certain proportion, rectangle, whatever. I'm not interested in that. I have canvases that I've pre-ordered that are all different sizes. I choose one that's sort of in the neighborhood of, and I start working on that. In other words, I'm not interested in, like a lot of painters will grid something off and then try to, copy it from that and match it up that way, or they'll project an image with an overhead projector and then, stencil it out or sketch it out. I'm not interested in any of that. I'm interested in starting a painting from blankness, really. So every painting I start, and I was wondering about this not that long ago too. Every painting I start starts differently. They all end up looking the same. I wonder if I should worry about that. But they literally start each painting. Sometimes I draw, some figures in that are part of the thing. Sometimes I just paint colors on it to get rid of the white. Sometimes I say I'm just going to paint around something, and I'll do that for a while, and then I'll get involved in painting a figure, and I'll develop the figure, and then there's nothing else. Or it's like every time there's no one way that I do it. I use different brushes, et cetera, et cetera. So, let's hear from a guy.
I enjoyed your talk.
Thank you.
What's your biggest distraction outside of work?
Tennis. Yeah, I love playing it, and I oftentimes leave my studio to go play it, and I like watching the big tournaments and stuff. So I often have it going on while I'm painting and things. But that would be a big. Were you looking for something a little bit more romantic?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah. No, I told them when they asked me to submit a proposal to Arthur Ashe, I said, I was born to make this sculpture. I may not be a good tennis player, but I know the game. I can do this. So, anyway, yeah.
So, has it ever happened to you in the creative process where when you finished the 8th painting of the bullfight, you knew you were finished? Is there ever a time that nothing happens, where you don't have an idea, or don't have any idea of what you're going to do? Is that a hard time?
I live in fear of that time. Yeah, yeah. No, that's a nightmare. But I also am somebody. I don't paint from inspiration. I'm a workaday painter. I go in and I try to do something every day, and what happens is just in the process of doing something connects. And then it flows, and mine may only flow for a little short time, and then I'm back at that place of just workaday stuff till I find it again, or it may flow into a much bigger, deeper thing. So I don't do it. But if I waited around for inspiration, it would never come. So, I think that's part of the process for painters is that this thing unlocks something. This actual, the smell, the grease, the color, the feel of the brush on the, things all of a sudden just start to happen that you think, oh, I'm feeling it now. Anyway.
Oh, here's somebody right here. You went from the camera. You right there. Yeah.
I just have a comment, actually. And thank you so much for your information. I'm fascinated. And I've known your wife since art school. She inspired me.
You've known her since Cleveland?
No, I was at the National Academy of Design.
Oh, okay.
And I had a conversation with her.
Oh, since you were in art school?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, wow.
But at any rate,
She'll be thrilled to hear that.
interested in your comment about Giacometti.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've read James Lord's.
I haven't, no.
It's very interesting. He sat for Giacometti.
Mm-hmm.
And Giacometti had no money.
Mm-hmm.
He walked around with a book of matches.
Yeah,
That was his entree.
I know. He peed in a bucket. I know.
So I think what he created out of a match.
I'm in no way disparaging Giacometti. Giacometti is the greatest sculptor of the 20th century. And no, I didn't mean it that way. But what it is that his particular vision of our existential reality is something that doesn't work anymore. It only works in terms of respect and appreciation of what he was able to do. It's not our reality. And it's not, we can't keep expressing it that way. I mean,
How do we define our reality?
well, I think that we have a gigantic problem with the body. Okay? And the way that I'll give you a personal example of why I believe this to be true. 9/11 happens. 3,000 people die. There are no bodies. 3,000 people disappear. The grieving process takes the form of architectural language. It's like all of a sudden the passion, the connection to each other all came through this thing of, throwing lights up that look like the Twin Towers, of talking about the sacred ground and preserving the footprints, the literal footprints of it, about resurrecting the buildings to show that we're still mighty, et cetera, et cetera. No people. The images that we had of people jumping or falling disappeared the same day. That they were so terrifying to us that we didn't know how to handle that, right? All of our response to that comes from the fact that we don't know how to deal with mortality. And that our affirmation of life through the body is an awareness and acceptance of death itself as part of that process, right? So what is the problem? The problem is that if we can't deal with death, we run in the opposite direction, right? So you have artists that are making infantile work. They're playing with toys. They're playing with dolls because they can't become adult, right? Because that's too terrifying. Because what's next, right? They're making sculptures out of body casting. Body casting is a reproduction. It comes from the death mask. It's a memory device, but it's not a creative act in the sense that it doesn't actually recreate a being.
It's mummification.
That's a nice way of saying it. So you understand what the problem is.
Sculptor,
Okay, so you know what the problem is. So to me, there's an urgency here, right? But it's something that has to come with an understanding that if we don't actually confront the body in all its manifestations, we're not going to be able to handle our own realities. And therefore, we're going to find these perversions as a way of dealing with them. And, you know, I obviously feel strongly about it. But, yeah.